controls the hands that rock the crib controls that population and every generation born off of that population. What does this mean in real terms? The ultimate goal of the warlord, the apex predator, who hunts and herds the life energy of man, he and she, is to conquer and maintain control of the conquered population. The goal and objective is to instigate division and conflict among conquered populations through the orchestration of racial tension, religious indifference, and tribal and ethnic clashes, in order to keep those populations destabilized, distracted, and thus preventing any unified movement that could threaten the warlord's rule. Thus, a warlord will seek to possess the booty and the spoils of war, with special attention on the conquered female, whom he uses to breed his way of life. Keep in mind that the warlord lineages are master hunters and herders who have developed animal husbandry methodology as a way of life for millennia. Although these masters of animal husbandry were known to intimately relate to their herded animals, the practices of animal husbandry goes far beyond bestiality, including methods of breaking the spirit of the animal, crushing its will. These methods are socially rationalized and identified as training, taming, and domestication. In fact, when it comes to biological warfare, it is animal husbandry that is used to seek out ways and means to advance the kill and to genetically modify or otherwise alter the animal's natural state of being. In the early days of the invasion culture, man, he and she were in fact hunted, herded, and otherwise dealt with in the same way as sheep, goats, cows, horses, pigs, etc. Thus, invaded populations were categorized as animals to be bought, sold, and used in the same manner as any other privately owned livestock. We note that the breaking process of the apex predator is so harsh, cruel, and penetrating that recovering into a natural and innate state of being becomes very difficult. What has been noted is that the young, unbroken, domesticated male or female does have the capacity to readjust to a natural and innate state of being. However, the longer one is under the influences of the broken and domesticated parent, the more one becomes conditioned by those examples. We note that the female is an instinctual nurturer. As such, she tends to more easily adapt to environmental circumstances. As for the male, his natural and innate instincts is to provide guidance and protection over his female counterpart, who, within her instincts of being a nurturer, is instinctually protective of the offsprings. What has come to be realized by the predatory warring male is that the older the male, the more difficult it is to instigate change in that male. For this reason, the warlord has historically eliminated the elder and more mature males while capturing the younger males for stud service, as a labor force, or for armed services and entertainment. The younger maturing females are used for domestic service, as a sex slave and a breeder. These are the codes of the warlord, and these codes are still in place and intact in these modern times, be it animal or be it man, he and she. The apex predator is well aware of his codes of war, which are established and adjusted as necessary to carry out his agenda of supremacy. And for these reasons, the apex predator focuses his concentration on controlling and containing the female, and therefore on controlling and containing her offsprings, while keeping the adult male destabilized and disconnected from his natural and innate family order. We must comprehend that the primary tool of the warlord strategy is the breaking process, which remains the same whether the female is a mare in the domestication of a horse, or a man, he and she, in the making of a slave, be it a social, economic, political, or religious slave, be it a wage slave or a debt slave. The focus of the master warlord is to control the life energy of the being from the crib to the grave. In these terms, any untamed male is seen as a challenger, and therefore the master predator works to separate, remove, and restrain the male in order to establish a matriarchy among the conquered population. In simple terms, a matriarchy is a social system where the female is the head of the household, regardless of whether there is or is not a stable adult male present. This imposed matriarchy conditions the female to function within a codependent-like relationship within the master predator's patriarchy that dominates and controls the social order and therefore demands her allegiance. The conquered male is placed in opposition to his own female counterpart, who becomes a tool of his further domination and control, as she nurtures every assimilated quality, characteristic, and behavior that will ensure that she and the offspring survive, according to the Warlord's agenda. With the male mentally and physically nullified, the female and the offsprings born off of her become hog-tied to a social order that reduces her and her offsprings to a lower and lesser state of being. The female's major aim is to be accepted and thereby gain favor and status within the warlord's culture, and this is what she instills in her offsprings. And as for her son, he is forced to reject any ancestral sense of masculine guidance and protection in order to accommodate the warlord's social order. As a result, the solarized male either become passive or even effeminate under the smothering of a domineering mother, or he turns hardcore, merciless, and violence-prone as he emulates the warlord in rebellion against mother and against father or any other male whom he sees as an authority figure. The solarized male has been manipulated and maneuvered into combat, pushed into a cold-blooded and merciless engagement, a vicious and deadly spiritual war, the same kind and type of spiritual war that has occupied the mindset of the apex predator and the warring tribes and clans born off of those lineages over the past millennia up until today. In every instance, the enemy is the pale mental mindset. However, the tendency is to project the enemy outside of self, making everyone else vulnerable to an attack in accordance to the warlord's values. So the first line of attack goes to those whom the warlord sees as the most inferior, as one works oneself through enemy lines from the bottom up. Thus, in general, the solarized male sees the solarized female as an adversary or an opponent, whom he seeks to dominate and control, and who seeks to dominate and control his life energy. The bottom line is that the solarized male has been well programmed and conditioned to disrespect the solarized female, honoring no relationship with her beyond a social, economic, sexual partnership, and even that is oftentimes in question. Ironically, the solarized male has been conditioned to respond to the solarized female in the exact same ways and means as the master warlord deals with her. However, oftentimes he forgets she has been systematically conditioned to give her loyalty to the master warlord, who has made it very clear that NAS is the code of honor.
There be a war going on, a spiritual war to turn the entire planet Earth into a white blight zone. Yes, indeed, there be a spiritual war, and the opposite energy will appear to be winning so far. And the signs of the times will show that the lost and stray mind was handcuffed and bound by spiritual crime. And the gray ghost will whine and dine on the confused state of mind.